The Silent Beacon. Marcus Vey killed the engines of his salvage hauler and let the vessel drift toward the hulking silhouette of Helios Prime. The mining station had been abandoned for nearly 2 years, left to rot after the ore veins dried up and the company pulled out overnight. Now it was just another carcass floating in the black, waiting for people like Marcus to strip it down for parts. He maneuvered through the docking port, his ship's hull groaning as the magnetic clamps engaged. The station's emergency power flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the empty corridors. Marcus pulled on his environment suit and stepped into the airlock, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. The silence was absolute. His boots echoed on the metal grating as he made his way through the main corridor, scanning for anything valuable: copper wiring, intact processors, maybe even some fusion cores if he was lucky. But as he approached the old communication hub, he heard something that made him freeze. A soft, labored breath. Then a faint scraping sound. Marcus turned the corner and saw her. A woman, collapsed against the wall near the main console, her body trembling. Even in the dim emergency lighting, he could see the strange, shimmering patterns on her exposed skin, like veins of liquid silver running beneath the surface. Her clothing was torn and scorched, revealing what looked like ceremonial armor underneath. "Hey," Marcus called out, rushing forward. "Can you hear me?" Her head lifted slightly, and he saw her face, beautiful despite the exhaustion etched into her features, with eyes that seemed to hold entire galaxies. She reached out weakly, her fingers trembling as they grasped at the air between them. Marcus caught her just as she pitched forward, her weight settling into his arms. Up close, he could see the intricate markings on her forehead and cheekbones. Definitely not tattoos, something deeper, something biological. She looked up at him with an expression of such profound relief that it startled him. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice barely audible through cracked lips. "Human." Then her eyes fluttered closed and she went limp in his grasp. Marcus stood there for a moment, his mind racing. He should leave her. Whatever trouble she was running from wasn't his problem. He was a salvager, not a rescue operation. But as he looked down at her face, peaceful now in unconsciousness, something inside him shifted. "Damn it," he muttered, adjusting his grip and lifting her more securely. She was lighter than he expected, her body almost fragile despite the obvious strength in her frame. He carried her back through the corridors to his ship, laying her carefully on the medbay cot. As he began removing her damaged armor to assess her injuries, he noticed the insignia embossed on the chest plate. A symbol he recognized from old history files. The Celestian sovereignty, a civilization that was supposed to be extinct. Marcus sat back staring at the unconscious woman. Whoever she was, whatever she was running from, he had just made everything in his simple life infinitely more complicated. But when her hand unconsciously reached out and her fingers brushed against his wrist, seeking contact, even in sleep, he found he didn't mind as much as he should have.
Fragments of empire. Lyran's eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft lighting of the medbay. For a moment, panic flared in her chest. She didn't recognize her surroundings. Then she saw him, the human from the station, sitting in a chair beside her cot, his head tilted back against the wall, eyes closed in light sleep. She studied him quietly. His face was weathered, marked by the kind of life spent in hard vacuum and harder choices. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and she noticed the small scars on his hands, working hands, hands that had carried her to safety when he could have simply walked away. "You're awake," Marcus said without opening his eyes, making her jump slightly. He straightened and looked at her with those steady brown eyes. "How do you feel?" "Weak," Lyran admitted, her voice still rough, "but alive, thanks to you." "Marcus Vey," he said, offering his hand. She took it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the calluses that spoke of honest work. Lyran Ashara, she replied softly, then hesitated. Of the Celestian sovereignty. Marcus nodded slowly. I figured it was something like that. The markings, the armor. I thought your people were gone. We are, Lyran said, her voice breaking slightly. She pulled her hand back and looked away. I watched my homeworld burn from orbit. The Iron Covenant came with such force, such cruelty. They wanted our technology, our ancient knowledge. When we refused to surrender it, she trailed off, her fingers trembling. Marcus reached out and gently took her hand again. The gesture was simple, but it grounded her, pulled her back from the abyss of memory. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready, he said quietly. But she found she wanted to. Over the next hours, as his ship drifted through quiet space, Lyran told him everything. How she had been studying at the Royal Archives when the attack came. How her mother, the Empress, had forced her into an escape pod. How she had drifted for weeks before finding Helios Prime, surviving on emergency rations and hope. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions, sometimes just sitting in silence beside her. He brought her food, simple rations that tasted like heaven after her ordeal. When she struggled to sit up, he slipped an arm behind her shoulders, supporting her weight without making her feel helpless. Why did you save me? Lyran asked during one of these quiet moments. You could have taken my armor, my equipment, and left me there. Marcus was quiet for a long time. I don't know, he finally admitted. Maybe because I've been alone out here for too long, and I recognized that look in your eyes. What look? Someone who's forgotten what it feels like to not be alone. Lyran felt something shift in her chest, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with physical healing. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He didn't pull away. In my world, there were protocols, rules about who I could speak to, who I could touch. Everything was ceremony and distance. She moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. I've never felt this before. Marcus's hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. Felt what? Free, Lyran breathed. The space between them disappeared. Their lips met softly first, tentative, then with growing certainty. Marcus's hand slid into her hair while her fingers gripped his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming a conversation without words. Loneliness finding companionship, isolation finding connection. When they finally parted, both breathing harder, Lyran rested her forehead against his. This complicates things, Marcus said, though he made no move to pull away. Everything is already complicated, Lyran replied with a small smile. What's one more impossible thing? Outside the viewport, stars drifted past in silence, witnesses to the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both desperately needed.
The choice between worlds. The coordinates Lyran provided led them to a system Marcus had never heard of, hidden behind layers of gravitational anomalies that would shred most navigation computers. But Lyran guided him through with the certainty of inherited knowledge, passed down through generations of Celestian royalty. When they emerged on the other side, Marcus felt his breath catch. Floating in the purple-tinged light of a dying star was a structure unlike anything he had ever seen. A sanctuary built into a massive crystalline asteroid, its surfaces gleaming with that same luminescence that marked Lyran's skin. Ships dotted the docking bays, more than he expected. There are others, Lyran whispered, tears streaming down her face. Survivors! The docking procedure was tense. Armed guards met them at the airlock, their weapons trained on Marcus until Lyran stepped forward. The moment they saw her markings, her bearing, everything changed. They dropped to their knees. Your Highness, the lead guard breathed, we believed you were lost. Lyran helped them to their feet, her royal composure sliding back into place like armor. But Marcus saw the way her hand trembled, the way she glanced back at him as if needing reassurance that he was still there. The sanctuary was beautiful and heartbreaking, a fragment of a civilization clinging to existence. Perhaps 200 Celestians remained, maybe fewer. They gathered in the main hall as word spread of Lyran's arrival, their faces showing hope for the first time in months. The Council of Elders met with Lyran privately, but their voices carried through the thin walls of the adjoining chamber where Marcus waited. You are the last of the royal bloodline, Princess Ashara. The people need you to lead them, to rebuild what was taken from us. There are so few of us left, Lyran's voice replied, strained. How can we rebuild an empire from ashes? With dedication, with sacrifice. A pause. You must put aside personal attachments and focus on your duty. That human you brought, he cannot remain. His presence is a distraction you cannot afford. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had known this moment would come, had tried to prepare himself for it. Lyran was a princess, the last hope of her people. He was just a salvager who happened to be in the right place at the right time. He was making his way toward the docking bay when Lyran found him. "Where are you going?" she demanded, catching his arm. "Giving you the space to do what you need to do. Your people need you, Lyran. Don't," she interrupted fiercely. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." She pulled him into a side corridor away from prying eyes and pressed him against the wall. "You are not just anything. Lyran, I saw how they looked at me. I heard what the elders said. You have responsibilities, a duty to—" She kissed him, hard and desperate, cutting off his words, which she pulled back. Her eyes were blazing. "My entire life has been about duty, about being what others needed me to be, doing what was expected, saying the proper words, making the correct choices." Her hands framed his face. "You are the first choice I've made for myself. The first person who saw me, not a title or a symbol. Your people. My people deserve a leader who understands that empires built on isolation and rigid protocol failed us. My mother ruled with duty above all else, and it left us vulnerable, unable to adapt, unable to reach out for help when we needed it most." She took his hand and placed it over her heart. "You taught me what it means to connect, to trust, to feel. Don't you see? That's what we need to survive. Not isolation, but bridges." Marcus pulled her close, burying his face in her hair as Lyran's fingers worked at the fastenings of his shirt. They moved together to the soft grass beneath the flowering trees, the bioluminescent blooms casting dancing shadows across their skin. Marcus traced the luminescent patterns on her shoulders, her collarbone, watching in wonder as they pulsed brighter under his touch. Lyran gasped softly, her back arching as his lips followed the path his fingers had taken. "You're beautiful," he murmured against her skin. "So are you," she replied, pulling him down to her. They came together slowly, tenderly, learning each other in the gentle light of alien flowers. Lyran whispered words in her native language that Marcus didn't understand but felt in his bones. He answered with kisses and touches that spoke louder than any words could. Afterwards, they lay intertwined, Lyran's head resting on Marcus's chest as his fingers traced idle patterns along her spine. "The elders will demand I choose," Lyran said quietly. "Tomorrow, they'll want an answer." "And what will you tell them?" Lyran lifted her head, her eyes meeting his with absolute certainty. "That I've already chosen, that my human showed me a better way forward, not through isolation and empire, but through connection and partnership." She kissed him softly. "That wherever he goes, I go. Whatever future he builds, I'll build beside him." Marcus held her tighter, feeling the weight and wonder of her choice. Even if it means leaving all this behind? This is beautiful, Lyran said, looking around at the gardens, but it's a monument to what was. You're my future, Marcus. You're what could be. They fell asleep there among the alien flowers, wrapped in each other, while above them, the sanctuary hummed with the whispers of a civilization preparing for its last princess to make an impossible choice. Part 5. A New Constellation. The attack came at dawn. Alarms shrieked through the sanctuary as Iron Covenant warships emerged from the anomaly field, their weapons already charging. They had found the Celestian survivors, and this time, they came with overwhelming force. Marcus and Lyran ran for the command center, still pulling on their gear. The scene was chaos, civilians scrambling for shelter, while the few remaining Celestian warriors rushed to defensive positions. "How did they find us?" one of the elders demanded. "It doesn't matter," Lyran said with a voice that carried the authority of generations of rulers. "What matters is defending our people." She turned to Marcus. "Can your ship's systems interface with Celestian technology?" "If you tell me how, yeah." "Then we coordinate the defense together. Elder Caspian, evacuate non-combatants to the lower chambers. Elder Mara, get our fighters in the air. Marcus and I will handle tactical coordination." The elders hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with taking orders that included a human, but the urgency of the situation overrode protocol. They scattered to their tasks. Marcus and Lyran worked side by side at the command console, their different approaches complementing each other perfectly. He understood unconventional tactics and improvisation from years of surviving on the margins. She brought strategic training and deep knowledge of both Celestian and Covenant technology. Their lead ship shields have a rotation cycle, Lyran observed, highlighting the pattern on the display. "And if we hit them during the gap with everything we've got," Marcus traced a firing solution, "we could disable their flagship and scatter the formation." Lyran looked at him with fierce pride. Brilliant. The battle was brutal. Covenant forces hammered at the sanctuary's shields, while Celestian fighters darted between the enemy ships like silver fish. Marcus coordinated the defense fleet with the same instincts he used navigating asteroid fields, while Lyran timed the shield strikes with perfect precision. When the moment came, every Celestian weapon fired simultaneously. The Covenant flagship's shields flickered, failed, and the ship went dark, drifting helplessly. But the victory came at a cost. The Sanctuary's main shield generator overloaded from the massive power draw. They had minutes before the Covenant regrouped. "We need to evacuate," Marcus said. "Now." Lyran looked around at the command center, at the elders who had spent months hiding here, protecting their last fragment of civilization. Then she looked at Marcus and saw her future. "Elder Caspian, begin full evacuation. Distribute the population across all available ships." "And go where, Your Highness? This is all we have left." Lyran stood straighter, her luminescent markings blazing in the darkness, responding to her emotions. "Then we will build something new, something better." She gestured to Marcus. "This human showed me a better way forward, not through isolation and empire, but through connection, connecting, growing. The Celestian sovereignty fell because we isolated ourselves, believed ourselves above others. Our future lies in joining the wider galaxy, not hiding from it." "You would have us abandon everything we were?" Elder Mira asked, shocked. "I would have us become something we never were. Partners instead of rulers, sharers of knowledge instead of hoarders. We have technology, wisdom, history that could benefit countless worlds. And in return, we could finally be part of something larger than our own pride." The elders looked at each other, then at the tactical display showing the Covenant ships regrouping. Reality left them little choice. "As you command, Princess Ashara," Caspian said quietly. The evacuation was controlled chaos. Marcus helped coordinate the escape routes, while Lyran made sure every Celestian, every precious seed from the gardens, every data crystal of their history made it onto the ships. When the last transport lifted off, the Covenant was already breaching the outer defenses. Aboard the Wandering Echo, now leading a ragtag fleet of Celestian vessels, Marcus and Lyran stood side by side at the